Otherwise, we'll consider it approved. Don't see any at this point. So one moment, please. We're looking up the date of the meeting prior to that. Okay, apparently we did not approve the 5th either. So again, if there's discussions or concerns about it, let me know. Otherwise, we'll consider those approved too. So, with that, well, it's been a couple meetings ago now, we were discussing House Bill 2435, and that got tabled. So I'd like to go ahead and start working on that again, and I'd like to call on Mr. Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was responsible for tabling the bill, and accordingly, I'd like to move that we remove HB 2435 from the table for further consideration, including hearing and possible final action.
Excellent. Mr. Holheisel, I see a second over there. Thank you, Mr. Carmichael, for doing that. I appreciate everything. And the other day. All right, so the bill is out. I would also like to call on, okay, so I'm going to call on Mr. Carmichael. I'm going to make sure, or I'm sorry, Mr. Holheisel. Because when we tabled it, there was a...
Before, we've got to vote on the motion to untable first.
Oh,
yeah.
My bad.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. So yeah, we had the motion to pull it off the table. We had a second by Mr. Holheisel. So all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Don't hear it. Okay, now the bill is out. Sorry about that. So I know when just before we tabled it, there was a motion and I believe a second for a substitute bill at that time. So I'm going to call on Mr. Holheisel concerning that substitute.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. When we tabled it, we were in the middle of discussions on a proposed amendment that I brought. I would like to withdraw that amendment at this time.
Okay. So who seconded that? Do you remember? Because do they have to remove their second also?
We could check the minutes. I'm not exactly sure who seconded it.
Mr. Chair, I would suggest you simply say, absent objection, it will be withdrawn.
Okay, so yeah.
Sounds good.
So absent of any objections, then it would be withdrawn. Is there any objections or concerns or discussion on that? All right.
Mr. Chair.
Motion, go ahead, Mr.
I was going to say, if you want, I can introduce the new.
Yeah, since then, now we are still just on a discussion level, but since then there has been more discussion on a new substitute bill. So would you like to
I will
introduce that?
I do have an amendment for the substitute bill.
Okay. So, and I would like to go through and we'll hear discussions on that before we get into final action. So this is purely discussion and hearings at this point in time.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Bohai.
Second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Bohai is the second on that. Thank you. Okay. Everybody gets the substitute passed out. All right. With that, would our revisor like to tell us what we got here?
Yes, certainly, Mr. Chairman. So committee, if you remember last time, the proposed substitute bill would have amended the GSRS and done this as a substitute bill. And there were a few things in there. So we're authorizing this GSRS recovery of growth-related capital investment for natural gas utilities, requiring the KCC's application process for a natural gas public utility to increase its GSRS to go down to 90 days from 120 days, authorize GSRS filings once per calendar year instead of every 12 months, increasing the cap on the GSRS from 80 cents to $1.35. Now that's the cap that a residential customer's monthly bill can increase, as we discussed at that meeting, and then also providing for ongoing inflation adjustments to that cap. This second proposed substitute makes two changes to that, to the prior substitute that we heard. So the first change is removing the inflation adjustment. So that the cap would increase to $1.35, but there would be no ongoing inflation adjustment there. So that whole bulk of the language that you may remember from pages 5, 6, and 7, that is all stricken and removed from this bill, from this second proposed substitute. The other change in this second proposed substitute is on page 3, and it's relating to that growth-related capital. And you see at the end of that paragraph 6 on the top of page 3, there's a new provision excluding allocated corporate costs. So it does include that growth-related capital, but it excludes those corporate costs that are borne by the utility at the executive level. And Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Nick. Any questions for the reviser, Mr. Carmichael?
Mr. Myers, I've only had a chance to give this second substitute a quick review, but I assume it also contains, or it also strikes the plant in service accounting that was in the original bill to which the KCC had objected.
Yes, so this proposed substitute would only be changing the GSRS and the recovery via that process. That plant and service accounting mechanism that was once in House Bill 2435 would be completely gone. This would be a whole new substitute bill with this change.
Thank you, sir.
Further questions? All right, not seeing any. Mr. Van Houten? Okay. Not seeing any then. Thank you, Nick, for that. I'd like to call up Patrick Vogelsberg, Kansas Gas Service. Welcome to the committee, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Good to be with you again today. Patrick Vogelsberg with Kansas Gas Service. And Mr. Chairman, I can be as brief or as long as you want, but I figured what I would do is just give some overall highlights of where we started, where we finished up, and just a little bit more on the amendments that you see before us in the revised substitute bill. So I'd like to remind the committee that this bill is about reducing regulatory lag on particularly growth investments that we make. And there's a lot of different ways in which you can do that. The original bill dealt with plant and service accounting deferrals. And that's something that the committee's familiar with 2024 and what was done with PISA for the electric side. But it's not the only way to reduce regulatory lag. There's also other ways. We hear, CWIP, construction work in progress, or performance-based rate making. These are all different ways in which you can reduce regulatory lag. And what, in discussions, what we heard in testimony and what we've worked through with other conferees on this bill was a preference to not create a brand new separate mechanism for gas utilities in Kansas, but to use something that is, tried and true, is familiar to the gas companies and regulators and other regular interveners, which is the Gas Safety Reliability Policy Act, which contains, and I apologize for all the acronyms, the Gas System Reliability Surcharge, GSRS. And so in my testimony, we have moved away from PISA and looking at GSRS. And in my testimony, you'll find some background on GSRS and how that mechanism works. But it's something that we have used over the last 20 years. And it has been effective for upgrading particularly the system integrity, pipeline safety of our system. And those investments have worked very well and resulted in 99.9% reliability rate for our gas infrastructure that has been tested significantly over the past few winters, but most notably Winter Storm Uri. So it's been a great mechanism for us to use for that. And what we want to do is modernize that to include growth investments. In my testimony, I provide that background on GSRS, but what I'd like to do is maybe focus a little bit more on the substitute bill and what it does, and particularly amendments since the last time this substitute was before you. There was conversations and questions around the CPI index. And so in the last time we met on Monday with other conferees, we offered to take that piece out. And so that there wouldn't be an automatic adjustment for inflation in it. So the $1.35 residential cap would just remain that. And then the other piece that was asked for from KCC staff was in the expansion of the growth investments, adding to the list is one part that on page 3, as Nick indicated, any other investments in plant facilities or equipment. Originally, and this was previous to the last substitute, but originally we wanted including allocated corporate cost. We removed that in the last substitute, the including part, and KCC staff wanted to make clear that this would exclude allocated corporate costs, and that was something that we were in agreement to. My understanding is that KCC staff is providing testimony that they are neutral on it. My understanding is that Mr. Snyder with Kansans for Lower Electric Rates will provide neutral testimony on this. And I will be, upfront with this is that our understanding is that Citizens Utility Ratepayer Board remains opposed, and I think it's there's just a fundamental disagreement on whether or not to include growth projects in the GSRS mechanism. And from our perspective, that is the substance and the rationale for bringing the underlying bill and continuing to work through this bill here. It is to do something about those growth investments. GSRS does not eliminate regulatory lag. What it does is it allows for an annual filing, and so regulatory lag gets down to about a 15-month lag. And what we're trying to do is bring the growth investments, match it up to a 15-month lag. The underlying bill, the PISA bill, would have, ultimately, effectively eliminated regulatory lag up to the time in which we put plant in the service. This does not do that. It takes it to about a 15-month lag. And for the same rationale for the underlying bill, as far as what this does for, timeliness of deploying our infrastructure, and particularly for growth opportunities to meet demands of our residential customers and commercial customers and help the state meet its economic goals, that same rationale applies to this. So I'm happy to go into more detail. I do want to point out there are a couple attachments to my testimony, and this was just in reference to some questions as far as, what are the current charges, GSRS charges for, in addition to residential customers, but others. I've attached that to the back of my testimony. But with that, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate what you've done to give the parties some space here and some patience to let us work out, a bill that is a Kansas-specific bill that's modeled off of existing Kansas law, and just modernize what we know works to achieve a similar goal. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Vogelsberg. And I want to say the thanks doesn't go to me, it goes to the whole committee. We work as a team here, and I've been really pleased with it. First off, Ms. Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First question is, we're all players at the table, because I know when we left the last time, there were 2 definite no's that stood up and said no. So was everyone part of this conversation?
So throughout this, from the original meetings, those conversations included Kansas Gas Service, Black Hills, KCC staff, and CURB. And those groups have been on it. Since then, I believe that there's been 4 meetings throughout. Atmos joined the meetings as well, so all 3 of the gas utilities. And then in the last meeting, Kansans for Lower Electric Rates and, or KIC, was also part of that. Americans for Prosperity, that I believe provided written testimony, and ARP that provided written testimony were not a part of those meetings. But we do feel that Citizens Utility Ratepayer Board, I can tell you, has, I feel, strongly advocated for those positions in those, but those other 2 parties were not a part of those negotiations on the final bill.
All right, but just to follow up, Kansas for lower rates were, and CURB
Yes.
were there. Okay, those were the 2 that said no. I believe very clearly the last time. There may have been some more, but those were the primary. One more question, Mr. Chairman. The changes that were made look like you came to a pretty good consensus between the group. Not everybody won, not everybody lost. Do you see this coming back to us again in a year to try to fill a gap, since that gap is going to be there?
You know, I've been asked that question as far as, will this keep you out from introducing legislation? And, you know, just like a legislature can't bind a future legislature, you know, I can't say what will come up. But to provide a little bit of context for you, the last bill that Kansas Gas Service introduced was the Kansas Energy Choice Act in 2021. And prior to that, I believe the previous bill was 2018 with the last time we updated the gas system reliability surcharge. We do not bring legislation every year. And I can tell you, when we were looking at GSRS, I think those discussions for us internally started in 2022 and 2023, and here we are in 2026. We were interested in 2024 with Evergy's PISA bill. We chose not to get involved there then. And we took 2025 to continue to study it. I say that all in that we are a very discerning company when it comes to introducing legislation, and we take our time before doing that. So I think we find this bill, is it the PISA bill that we introduced? No, but is it a good compromise? We agree.
Thank you for bringing the group together and bringing us something that possibly we can work with. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely. Mr. Tobias.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome back. Thank you for your presentation, Patrick. This is not a snarky question. When the gas rates go up for my constituents, what am I going to tell them that this mechanism is doing for them?
So the underlying investments that are here, and I'll try to be as succinct as possible, but the underlying investments are investments that are prudent investments. They're not investments in which we do not have the customer demand there to support those investments. So based upon that, we are going to recover those investments at some point. And either through a mechanism like this or through a general rate proceeding. So recovering through this allows for those investments to be recovered quicker, and the adjustments in rates will be more moderate, stabilized, gradual adjustments versus not having any rate increase until the rate case, and then you get all of it at once. And so that rate stabilization is a benefit, I think, for customers. And along that, the underlying goal of this is about growth. And the more customers that we can bring onto our system, those are more customers that are paying into the system, that are contributing to our overall revenue requirement for the gas utility. And the more customers that you have to spread that revenue requirement across will keep rates lower. And the size of customers that are on the horizon that we are in discussions with now are significant users, and that level of growth will ultimately benefit existing ratepayers.
And if I may ask one more question, how do you, I know that the gas utilities are sort of playing catch up when it comes to infrastructure and renewing aging infrastructure. Does that process of renewing infrastructure that keeps my house, for example, from blowing up one day, as one of my neighbors did about 5 blocks away, and I felt the pressure from that all the way to our house. Is replacing aging infrastructure part of the definition of growth, or is this just about, I don't want to say just because your explanation accepted, is this also about replacing aging infrastructure and increasing safety?
It is, because the underlying GSRS Act is focused on system integrity and system safety. And what that program, just for example, between the years 2014 and 2024, we have replaced every bare steel service line in the state. Now, we still have a few more coming on as we maybe acquire a few more customers, but for all intents and purposes, we have concluded the bare steel service line replacement program. And that results in removing bare steel and replacing with polyethylene pipe, which is tighter system, much safer. We are throughout that process, and what we will continue to do is move into our bare steel main replacement program, and that work will continue. I will say that if you look at our capital expenditures for Kansas, and this is similar to what we see in Oklahoma and Texas, is that about 70% of our overall capital expenditures go to system safety and integrity investments, and that will continue. That will not be reduced in favor of growth. That will continue because it's the right thing to do, but also as a backstop, a lot of it is just mandated for us to do that work. So,
For your answer, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Schlegeln-Siepens' questions prompt a few more. When I voted for an increase in the GSRS in, I think it was 2019, I think it was, 18, it was 40 cents. We doubled it. The reason I wanted to do that was I was concerned about safety issues. Particularly, I was concerned about things like meters, regulators on meters, which can freeze up and fail and cause gas jets to come shooting out of pilot lights. I was also concerned about the service lines from the quote-unquote main out on the street that go up to my meter, and you all are responsible for those, unlike some other utilities. Has that all been accomplished?
as far as the meter replacement, I think it is continuous work, and I'll look back at Lauren. She is shaking her head. I believe a big portion of those meter replacements have been accomplished, and those all go through the GSRS mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
What about the line that goes from my meter out to the street? It's an iron line. It's been lined
Yes.
inside.
Yes.
Are we up to date on those service lines, or we still have a backlog of those that need to be fixed out of the money that I gave you, in 2013 or whatever year it was?
Yeah, and
18.
I'll look back at one of my colleagues, but I believe all of that work, either relining projects as you indicate, or full replacement of the pipe has been completed for residential customers.
I and my neighbors will sleep much better, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Very good questions, Mr. Carmichael. So further discussion. Okay, not seeing any additional, now I'd like to hear a little bit, as much as you can divulge about future economic development projects. I understand you're under non-disclosures, but was that not more the underlying issue of this bill? You've got things coming down the pipe. Is there anything you can throw out to us? Just don't
Yeah,
get yourself in trouble.
what I would say with that is we do have significant opportunities in Kansas that are very real and similar to what we're seeing in Texas and Oklahoma. And what I would say with this would be we're evaluating over a dozen projects that could have significant natural gas demands. Each of these are large-scale projects. They're in what would be a different stage of development, and we are party to non-disclosure agreements. And for other reasons, it would be premature for me to pre-announce what those customers' plans are, just given the sensitive nature of these large commercial opportunities. So it is coming. We do have projects in other states that have been announced and are significant. And we think that Kansas, given its strategic location, not only with where natural gas is produced in this country, but also the existing natural gas infrastructure that can get that natural gas to the state. It is a strategic advantage for the state, and something that I know when we have conversations with the Department of Commerce, it's something that we encourage them to lead with, because that is the issue. It's whether or not you have the energy, and that's a competitive advantage that we feel Kansas is at, and we're excited to be a part and help the state achieve those goals.
All right, very good. Any further questions for Mr. Vogelsberg? Okay, before I let you go, Mr. Dameron is with you. Is there anything he'd like to say? Don't have to, but if there's anything you'd like to throw out here, we'd love to hear it.
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, appreciate that. So are there any other proponents that would like to talk? Not seeing any. We do go down to the neutral. I'm showing, well, I think we got Justin Grady virtually. Do we have him on the line? Okay. Justin, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Good
All
morning.
right. You
Chair
got the
Delphin. Can you all
You
hear
got the
me?
floor. You bet. Thank you.
Okay, great. Hey, good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Justin Grady. I'm Director of Utilities Division at the KCC. I appreciate the accommodation to be here virtually this morning. I'm double booked. I've got an all-day cost allocation working group meeting with the SPP that I'm doing this morning, and so I appreciate the opportunity to avoid the travel time downtown and back. I'm going to be brief as well. I thought Patrick did a great job of, explaining where we've been and where we started and where we ended up. The last time I was here testifying about HB 2435, I considered my job to notify the committee of what a potential dramatic shift that bill would have been in the regulatory policy landscape in the state of Kansas for natural gas utilities. What we opined was that we didn't think that was necessary given the existing statutory framework and mechanisms. And I think we recommended maybe on the fly, if we need to do something, then let's look at maybe increasing the cap on the gas safety reliability surcharge. To be honest, when I made that recommendation or threw that out, I wasn't hopeful that KGS was going to, consider that in a good faith manner in the fashion that they did. I just thought they, in the typical fashion, would be, sort of focused on what their idea was in their bill. But But thankfully I was proven wrong. And, in one of our first meetings that we had, we sort of reiterated where we were at and where the other parties were. And ultimately KGS came to the table and said, we can talk about the GSRS. So we're neutral because this is purely a policy call for the legislature at this point. In our mind, in my written testimony, I went through both advantages and disadvantages of what I see the legislation doing. Part of the increase to the cap is just the erosion of the ability to do the beneficial safety and reliability work that has occurred as a result of inflation and supply chain difficulties in this country, increasing cost of physical labor to install the mains and the service lines. Service lines are done. That's a great accomplishment. I mean, that is as one of the representatives said, I think it was Representative Carmichael, that him and his constituents will sleep better at night. Well, you should. I mean, the state is in a dramatically safer place today than it was 15 years ago with regard to the natural gas system in our state, in part because of the gas safety reliability surcharge. So what I would say is, 25 cents of that increase in the cap is just allowing these utilities to continue to do the work that they have been able to do in terms of the impact of the amount of capital investments. Now, the rest of it is a recognition of the allowing growth-related capital in the GSRS, and that remains an area of contention, I think, between the neutral and the proponents and the opponents. CURB, I'm sure, is going to do an admirable job explaining their position on this issue in terms of opposing growth-related capital. The reason we are not taking that firm stance is because I personally see this as being complementary to the state's energy policy goals over at least the last 4 or 5 years, which is to pursue economic development and to grow the beneficial utilization of utility systems in our state in order to lower the fixed costs, the allocation of fixed costs that go to all other customers by increasing the billing determinants. I think, that's probably enough for me to say at this point in terms of, a high level overview of where we stand. I certainly look forward to any questions that the committee has in terms of why we are taking the position that we are, or any clarifications at all that could be helpful. I'll do my best to answer those. So appreciate it. And again, I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
All right. Thanks again for being here, Justin. I appreciate your work you put in on this. I'm going to call on Mr. Carmichael first off.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Grady, can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Good morning.
Thank you, sir. First, do well for us at the allocation committee, please. That's important to all of us in Kansas. I'm glad you're doing the work you do. In your written testimony, you tell us that the likely result of this legislation will be higher natural gas rates for Kansas customers, and then you talk about the pace of those increases. And I recognize that gas, like eggs, is going to be more expensive going into the future. But can you explain to us, as one of the preeminent regulators in the Midwest, why it is that this bill will likely result in higher natural gas rates?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing I would say is, at least in between rate cases, it's nearly certain that the result of this bill will be higher natural gas rates for residential customers, right? Because this is going to recognize and include in rates capital investments that were previously unrecognized and were not allowed to be included in revenue requirements and the surcharge in the rate calculation. So that is certain. I'd say that's a near certainty, unless the utilities just don't utilize this additional capacity to make safety replacements and to grow the system beneficially. The reason I identified the specific cumulative effect of that in between rate cases is just for purely for transparency purposes and to recognize that, this very likely will result in increasing rates in between rate cases. On the other hand, if this bill unlocks or, incentivizes or removes a disincentive for gas utilities to proactively invest in growth-related capital investments, and those investments are successful, then it may end up being, either a wash or potentially a net benefit, right? I mean, by and large, the costs of providing natural gas service are fixed. Those costs do not increase the more the more natural gas usage customers use. And so, the committee's well aware that, rate making it's a math problem. It's a math issue. It's a cost to service business. It's total cost divided by total billing units. And if they are able to be successful in the fashion that it sounds like they may be able to, then we may be facing a much lower natural gas rates on a volumetric basis in the future once we have a rate case and we reset, those calculations and those billing determinants. So I guess the other thing I'd say, and, this is a situation where the types of investments that these gas utilities are making, admittedly, it's the growth capital that's maybe the more controversial element. But the type of investments that are unlocked through, for safety and reliability investments, that are maybe unlocked through increasing the cap for the effective inflation, those are critically important investments, right? I mean, these utilities still have 20, 30 years worth of aging infrastructure to replace. And every year we get a little bit safer. Every year the system gets a little bit more reliable. And I think that's the message. If a constituent asks, I mean, I've got friends and family that are natural gas customers. If they ask me, like, what are you doing over there? Why are you, not opposed to this? The response is, look, they don't start to bill customers for these investments until they are actually in the ground, gas is flowing through them, and they are benefiting the system overall, right? You're not going to start to pay more for these investments until they are actually literally benefiting the system, until they're in service and gas is flowing. And I think that helps. I mean, the customers I talk to, it helps to know that this money isn't just going to increase corporate profits or higher dividends or whatever, right? It's real beneficial investment in the infrastructure for the state of Kansas, and it's making Kansans safer. So,
Mr. Grady, that was a very helpful answer, and I intend to probably vote for this substitute bill in this legislation. So once that happens, you can tell your neighbors to complain to their state legislator. It wasn't your fault. And I'll do the same thing when my constituents ask me why their bills are higher. I'll say, blame the KCC. Thank you.
good to see you.
Further discussion. Further questions for Mr. Grady? I'm not seeing it. Thank you again, Justin, for being here. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else would like to speak for neutral? Not seeing it. I do show written only from Paul Snyder, Kansans for lower electric rates, or a neutral. For opponents, let's go on with Joseph with Curb. Welcome to the committee, sir.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you again for having me on this bill. My name is Joseph Astrab. I'm the Consumer Counsel for the Citizens Utility Ratepayer Board. And we are here again opposed to now the substitute for House Bill 2435. I want to start first by saying my gratitude to KGS, Patrick Vogelsberg in particular, and KCC for the discussions we've had regarding this bill. There was discussions throughout, there was consideration from our viewpoints, spent a lot of time trying to resolve the issues, work through them, and build understanding. And so I appreciate that collaboration. I think a lot of effort went into this bill, and, being candid, looking from where the bill started to where we are today, there's definitely been some progress. But we are still here opposed because of two reasons, and that's kind of the end of the niceties there, I suppose. talking about growth is one aspect of this, and then the use of the GSRS to facilitate this growth. As I noted in my testimony, both here and in the original bill, the concept of economic development related to natural gas usage is still speculative to me. I've made this point several times with the utilities and the KCC trying to glean more information and understanding the restrictions on NDAs and things like that. It still brings me concern about what types of industries are going to be utilizing natural gas versus electricity, for example. Or is there going to be a mutually exclusive industry where the natural gas has like plenary control, where supporting natural gas directly impacts bringing that industry here, where the electric side has their own with data centers, for example. And so I'm looking to ask, what is the natural gas data center we're looking for? And I haven't heard that yet. And so to me, when we're talking about economic development, and to be clear, CURB is in support of the state's economic development policy and understands the usage of energy and energy rates to attract customers. Our concern and our viewpoint is that to do so, we need to see something on the table. We need to have some definitive idea of what we're trying to attract and what we're understanding here. Because ratepayers want to know what their money is going towards when it's not going towards directly them and their gas bill or their meter. And as has been already said, this is going to increase bills. And so as a threshold issue, we would like to hear more about what is this impending economic development that's being spurred specifically by retail natural gas usage. And that brings us to my next point about growth. We've had a lot of time to talk about the electric side and the efforts that have been made to incentivize, or in the utilities' words, reduce regulatory lag. But let's be clear, we're trying to incentivize utility to do something that they're perfectly capable of doing on their own, but for the risk of not recovering those investments because that growth doesn't show up, or because the commission doesn't approve that for not being prudent. That's the scenario here. We've had a lot of discussions about this potential, and it sounds like there's a lot of revenue on the table. And if that's the case, why aren't these investments happening to support that potential growth? Again, economic development is fine using ratepayer funds, if at least we can tell our ratepayers what it is going towards, when can we expect the benefits, and be assured that that's happening for taking on that risk. And that's where we stand opposed to the inclusion of growth capital in a fixed surcharge. As we continue to approve these types of surcharges and allow for accelerated rate recovery between the gas and electric utilities, we're going to see ourselves going back and forth, giving now the electric side a fixed surcharge or a higher limit for the gas side the next year. And it's a spiral, it's a race to increase and become more competitive, not only to attract customers to Kansas, but also to choose between either electric or gas for your services if there's truly no mutually exclusive industry to support. And at the same time, ratepayers who use both gas and electric are feeling the pinch at both ends. It's no longer a seasonality thing where electric or gas is higher. It is a year-long impact on bills. And unlike the electric side with the piece of legislation, there's no time frame or limitation with the GSRs to be reviewed and to study whether or not growth capital being supported this way is effectively leading to economic development and those benefits. There's no sunset provision of the GSRS. And as we've heard already, there's still years and years more of safety and reliability investments to make. So by and large, the GSRS is going to be a part of bills for the foreseeable future. And if we allow growth into that, we're going to be constantly putting the risk of the outcome of growth on ratepayers that entire time. And to CURB, we just don't think that's acceptable. But turning to the GSRS itself, as I mentioned before, we think that the legislative history and the intent behind the GSRS when it was created is very important today. There are provisions in this bill specific to dealing with contemporaneous changes to modernize the system for customers that are using it today. Growth capital, by and large, is a perspective of forward-looking investment. The GSRS requires eligible projects to be used and in service and used and useful and required to be used for service. And so if the idea here is there's some indirect benefits to growth capital that impacts safety and reliability, then that should be argued under the current GSRS paradigm. There should be no need for growth explanation there. Further, even though this increase here breaks down to inflation plus growth, there's no limitation on how that split goes into the future. Even though 70% of today's investments are related to safety and reliability, there's no guarantee in this legislation or anywhere else that it will stay that way the next year or the following year. And so to co-opt and to shoehorn in growth into the GSRS risks taking away from the purpose of the GSRS and also cause a bit of confusion when it comes to the regulatory implementation of this. We're now arguing whether or not the growth is appropriate. What's the time frame to consider this growth to be appropriate? And whether or not we have to allow for indirect safety reliability benefits to justify within the GSRS. And that kind of takes away from the very specific nature and the keyed-in goals that it seeks to solve for. You look through the definitions there, it specifically defines what kind of projects relate to cybersecurity, modernizing the system. And House Bill 2435 simply wishes to make all that moot and open it up to any kind of planned investment. And that's just the beginning of that. With the cap, I've demonstrated before in the last testimony that the gas utility companies will utilize the cap to the fullest extent possible. They'll find ways to spend that money, and that's fine. We see those benefits in safety and reliability. But the more you put into growth, the more you put into that speculative risk, the more ratepayers risk losing out and spending money that's not benefiting them. And so if it's an issue of the GSRS fulfilling its current mission and needing to be revamped, then let's do that. Let's have a further discussion to redo the GSRS or create something different to really account for that growth. Now, I agree with the conferees today that this is a policy decision at the end of the day, that in order to spur economic development and get the utilities into the room to spend the money, to convince their parent company to allocate to the state of Kansas more funds they know they will recover, that's a policy call. But I think at the end of the day, we need to be able to tell our constituents what this money is going to and what we will see and when. So for that, we're opposed to the substitute for House Bill 2435, and I'm ready to stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Astrub. Questions? Mr. Carmichael.
Mr. Astrub, first, I'm glad that we got a chance to hear from you on the substitute bill, and I'm glad that you've got a seat at the table. Today's a tough day for me in some ways because I agree with what you say. But at the same time, I have to recognize the reality the gas company's going to get something here. And I think we've made at least some progress with the plant in-service accounting, the CPI escalator. We could argue about whether it really matters in the long term. But I just want to make sure you understand that I support the work that you and CURB does. You're valuable here, and the fact that I may not be with you today certainly doesn't mean I won't be with you tomorrow, and I want you to keep doing what you're doing because it's an important voice. You're the voice of my constituents. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. And obviously no hard feelings. Again, a policy call, but I just want to be able to tell my constituents like what to look forward to in the future.
Further discussion? Okay. Before you sit down, I echo what Mr. Carmichael said there. That's probably been one of your better testimonies I've heard from you, so I appreciate you doing the research and working with them. I do have a question on the RS or GSRS, but doesn't that reset like every rate case or every 5 years or so where it's not indefinite, but it would be put into a new?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So the surcharge itself does reset. What that means is all the revenue and the projects there gets moved into base rates. So it's still being part of rates that way, but the surcharge itself gets reset to allow for new projects to be filled in and to reset to the limit again. So the surcharge will reset, but the costs that are being paid currently and still need to be paid are still being recovered from ratepayers.
Makes sense. Okay. Any further questions? Thank you for being here. We do appreciate it. So, is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition to the bill? Not seeing anybody. We do have written only from Glenda Dubose with AARP. And that's all I'm seeing on there. Committee, further discussion before we close the hearing on the bill? Not seeing any, then I am going to close the hearing on, what is this? The second proposed substitute for 2435. And now I would like to go into final action for the second substitute for 2435. Mr. Hoheisel.
You, Mr. Chair, I believe I do have a motion that has been seconded on the amendment, so I will close and move the amendment for the substitute bill.
And you did. I just wanted to make sure we heard it properly in
Absolutely.
sequence. And I've got a second from Ms. Bohai. Okay. Would you like to talk, Mr. Myers?
So one thing, committee members, just so you have accurate information, and Mindy's been sent an updated copy. There is, I forgot to change the title on the paper copies that you have, and you will see a line that says requiring such cap to be adjusted each year for inflation. That title change has already been made, and Mindy has an updated copy that will go up online. So for all of you with paper copies, please strike that language because that is not what this bill does. So I wanted the committee to be aware just in case you get questions on that component.
All right. Further discussion, committee? Not seeing anybody. Mr. Hoheisel, would you like to move your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I close and move my motion.
All right. Committee, you've heard the motion from Mr. Hoheisel to pass out what I'm going to call the second
Mr. Chair,
substitute for HB
Mr. Chairman?
24.
My motion is just on the amendment first. We have to amend, and then we'll make the motion to pass out. I got you. Your
You're
vice
right.
chair, your
You're
vice
right.
chair is not here.
Okay,
That's fine.
I'm jumping ahead of myself.
Yeah, you're good.
A lot of stuff going on here.
Yep.
So, okay. So,
Motion to amend.
everybody in favor of Mr. Hoheisel's motion, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we pass out House substitute for HB 2435 favorably.
Right, and I have a second from Ms. Bohai. So, committee, you've heard the motion to pass it out favorably. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. And Mr. Carmichael would like to have his vote noted. Anybody else? Mr. Schlangenstein? Not seeing any further. My ranking member would like to have his recorded too. So there we go. All right. Committee, this is really the last day that we're meeting before turnaround in this committee. So I appreciate everybody's participation. Again, it's been great. Hope to see you back after turnaround at some point in time. It's going to be a little journey I've got to go ahead with though. So I'll call on my ranking.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say it's great to have you back. I know that you were out, so great to see you, and look forward to the turnaround. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and we are adjourned.